So let's talk about portraits. But first I want to tell you a quick story. Winston Churchill was giving a speech December 30th, 1941 to the Canadian House of Commons in Ottawa. And it was at one of the lowest ebbs of the World War II conflict for the Allied powers.
When I warned them that Britain would fight on alone, whatever they did, their generals told their Prime Minister and his divided cabinet, in 3 weeks, England will have her neck wrung like a chicken. Some chicken. Some neck.
Waiting backstage was portrait photographer Yusuf Karsh, who had been commissioned to shoot a portrait of the great leader. He was told he would have only 2 minutes in total in which to get the shot, and from the moment Winston Churchill stepped into the House of Commons antechamber, he made it clear he was not in the mood for a portrait. This is what happened in the photographer's own words. Churchill's cigar was ever present. I held out an ashtray, but he would not dispose of it. I went back to my camera and made sure that everything was all right technically. I waited. He continued to chomp vigorously at his cigar. I waited. Then I stepped forward, and without premeditation, but ever so respectfully, I said, "Forgive me, sir," and plucked the cigar out of his mouth. By the time I got back to my camera, he looked so belligerent he could have devoured me. It was at that instant that I took the photograph. Karsh took more photographs in that session, but it was pretty much that first image where he caught that raw moment that was the one that took off. Mostly because it was the Churchill that the rest of the world knew. It was the soul that they recognized and the person that the whole world desperately needed at that point. He'd managed to capture the real bulldog, belligerent Churchill. And that's the portrait photographer's job, is to see the real you and capture it in that moment. It's really hard nowadays. I think it's always been difficult, but even more so now in a very individualistic world. Most of us walk around with very, very polished and prepared personas, a view of ourselves that we like to sell the rest of the world, and we keep who we are pretty well hidden by and large. You probably heard the myth that a lot of cultures around the world, when photography first arrived in their culture, or someone came to take a photograph of their tribe for the first time, that they would feel as if, or say that it felt like their soul was being stolen and put onto that film or that celluloid. And I think that just speaks to the fear that we all have of being revealed. None of us wants to be exposed. When people walk into my studio for the first time for a portrait or a headshot, often they start with, "I don't like photographs of myself. I am very fussy about how I look on camera." And what they're doing is they're putting me on notice. This is a vulnerable situation for me. I feel uncomfortable about how I look on camera, and even though I know I must be here, I don't really like it. I heard a quote once, and I can't for the life of me remember where it's from, but it said something like, "Every portrait is a war between the sitter's vanity and the photographer's guile." That your subject is going to want to make sure that you capture the persona that they want you and the rest of the world to see. But you as the photographer have to be clever and aware and sneaky enough to catch the chink in the armor that reveals the real them and capture that in a photograph. I'd love to tell you how to do it, but I think it's going to come down to your personality as a photographer and how you draw people out. If you're an extrovert, you're going to be louder and you're going to put yourself out there more and draw them out that way. If you're an introvert, it might be quieter conversation or giving them things to do while they're having their portrait taken. I'll often do something with just testing lights, where I will set lights up and just say, "Don't stress, I'm just setting lights up, but just look at the camera and I'll just take some test shots and I'll tell you when we're starting." And often some of those early ones are good ones. Or I'll get them to close their eyes and look at the floor sometimes, and then count 3, 2, 1 and get them to look up at the camera. And there's a moment where they open their eyes wide and they just start to settle. If you can catch that split second, that often feels more honest than when they're settled into that pose that they want you to see. They need to know that I'm not out to embarrass them or shame them. I'm not doing some art project where I want a strange pose, I'm going to post it online and embarrass them in front of everyone they know. That I want to capture the real them, because I genuinely believe if I get an honest shot, it's a more attractive shot every time, because it reveals the real person. And everyone who looks at a photograph can feel the difference between a very polished and prepared pose and something that is an unguarded moment or is a genuine moment with a real human being. It's always interesting that at the end of a session, I'll pull the images up on the screen in Lightroom and sort of be scrolling through together and choosing which of the images, you know, that I'm going to go away and edit for them. And the one that is the most them is they'll have an interesting reaction to, I've found. They'll be drawn to it, but also quite scared of it. So they're like, oh, that one, oh, but I'm not sure. Other ones where they're like, yes, that's brilliant. I know that's probably not the one that I'm going to love at the end of the day, because that's the one where they look exactly the way that they want to. And I've got to talk them into the one that looks really like them. But every single time, if I manage to talk them into taking that shot that feels the most like them, that felt the most unguarded, it's always the one that gets the best response when they post it online from friends and family and people who know them most. It's a good idea for any photographer to put yourself in the position of the subject regularly, to hand the camera to someone else and get them to take photographs of you, or book a session in with a professional portrait or headshot photographer to remind yourself and give you empathy when you shoot other people that this is a vulnerable thing to do, to be on the other end of the lens. So as a portrait or headshot photographer, your job is going to be to create a safe space for your subject, to draw them out in however you do that with your personality, to wait for that crack in the armor and to get them to hold it open just long enough for you to